I think part of the reason here is it's a matter of not communicating internally, and that's because I think there's been too much of a concentration on trying to contribute to outside forces or outside media. But at the same time, I think there's a lack of skill. There's a lack of training among communicators, and you need communicators. Many of the unions also don't use full-time communicators or trained communicators. It'll be the general secretary or the president who'll go out there and make some pronouncement or write sometimes a grammatically badly phrased press release, that sort of thing. Whereas you actually do require professional communicators who really know their business, who know the sector they work in, who understand the union, and above all else, understand the principles of trade unionism. I think, the point is, in Africa, we're talking primarily about radio, because radio is perhaps the most commonly listened to or most commonly heard media anywhere. Print media, to a degree, in certain areas. Again, it depends on what market you're trying to reach, which audience you're trying to reach. But radio is important, but also what comes in there, of course, is language. You have to be very well aware of what language you're using in which particular area. It's very significant in South Africa. Among all the trade union websites, for example, I've only found one that uses more than one language, yet we have 11 official languages here. Admittedly, however, Zulu and Xhosa are not interchangeable, but they're mutually understood. In the same way, North, South Sotho and Tswana are mutually understood. So you can use 3 languages, basically, and you can get to the majority of the population. So one has to think also in terms of language. I think there's nothing better than rapport with the individual journalists. This is something that's very important. Of course, it's more and more difficult these days because there's been cost cutting. There's been a lot of cost cutting in the print media, in the digital media, right across the board. And you also have a lot of people who are under tremendous pressure, often very young, often poorly paid, who are having to produce an awful lot of material. But it's vitally important that the union communicators make contact with these journalists, and on a personal level, get to understand one another. They're both workers after all. Get to understand and trust one another. And that's the best way forward, because in a situation like that, you don't have the incredible mix-ups that sometimes happen, which have been mentioned at the conference here. Like, for example, the National Union of Mine Workers, NUM, giving a press statement and then being quoted accurately, but as NUMSA, the National Union of Metal Workers. That sort of thing should not happen, and it would not happen if you actually had that degree of rapport between the union communicators and the journalists. The benefit of unions to workers as a whole. After all, one has to stress, I think, over and over again, I tend to use the term sellers of labor, because workers, if you say someone's a worker, you'll find journalists who'll say, or someone who works in as a clerk in a bank or something will say, oh, I'm not a worker, I'm white collar, I'm therefore professional. No, it's everyone who's a seller of labor, and that has to be stressed, that everybody, we have a common interest in looking after our interests, looking after our planet. If you're going to take it on a broader scale, we all have a common interest as sellers of labor. And what that means is the overwhelming majority of the population in any community, country, throughout the world, globally, are workers. And that has to be the first point that has to be stressed. And then what we have to stress is the fact that, as in the South African Constitution, the Bill of Rights, not the Constitution, the actual Bill of Rights is a fantastic document which talks about the dignity of all shall be cherished. This is the point we have to make clear, that an egalitarian society is a better society. And for that reason, that is what has to be stressed as the underlying, shall we say, principle upon which everything else is built. So you don't go in there and simply argue for, in a wage dispute, for example, we want this amount of money. No, you point out how much people are earning as in proportion to others, who's being paid what. The fact that we had in South Africa 2 years ago the CEO of a supermarket chain who was paid 163 million rand for 1 year, whereas workers on the shop floor were being paid less than 3,000 rand a month, which is, 30,000 36,000 Rand a year. That's the sort of thing that has to be stressed. The inequality, and also on a global basis, we have to make unionists aware in every country about what is going on elsewhere as well. We should know, for example, in South Africa about what happens in Bangladesh, what happened at Rana Plaza, where a building collapsed, killing 1,134 people immediately. And most of them were women, young women, between the ages of 18 and 20, and 2,500 people injured, some of whom died later. We need to know about that, because that is what the clothes we wear, where do they come from? Look at the label. It's not a matter of saying, well, go and buy South African or buy Senegal or buy Zambian. No, we must become aware so that we can build a society, a global society should be what unions should be stressing, a global society which practices equality, which practices dignity of all, not just for the few.